Welcome, everyone, and Happy New Year. We're starting 2019. Oh, gosh, almost half the school year's over with already. Anyway, we're going, do we have student body report? Just cutting in there on time. I'll turn it over to you.
Hey, everyone. Sorry for walking in a little late. I was talking outside. But we just got back to school on Monday, so it's really exciting. We wanted to kick off the, home stretch until spring break. And so one of the things that us as Student Council implemented, and we just started it today actually, is what we call Hype Nights. And it's we made a punch card, like how Dutch Bros has their punch cards, and if you get 10 drinks, you get your 11th one for free. And so we made t-shirts that say David Douglas Hype on it. So it's a way to get students to actually come support each other at less supported games like water polo and wrestling. I know a lot of people come to wrestling, but it's kind of hard to get students to come support each other. And then the less attended basketball games, and just for all winter sports. So if you attend 10 of the hype events, we call them, you get a t-shirt for free that we designed ourselves in our class. And so we just wanted to have a way for kids to be motivated to come support each other, because of course we're gonna come to the events if we play the sport or our friends play the sport, or even our family members, brothers and sisters play the sport. We're gonna want to come attend, but a lot of people don't come because how often do you hear someone say, "Oh, I'm so excited to go to this swimming match. I'm so excited." You don't really hear that very often, and we wanted to put an end to the stigma against sports that aren't as popular as, say, basketball. That's typically what we think of when we think of winter sports, and so we wanted to give light to less attended sports. And another thing that we have coming up is the winter formal dance, and this year it is on January 26th. And the theme it's named Down the Rabbit Hole, A Night in Wonderland. And so the freshmen and sophomores typically plan the entire thing. No juniors or seniors help them. They kind of keep it a secret from us until the big reveal. And they're really excited to have it this year. I think it's going to be in the South again, because it's just where we typically have our on-campus dances. And I know we're super excited about the ticket sales beginning next week. And there'll be sales all week, dead week and finals week, so that we can have the dance shortly after. And then one big thing that we're doing in Student Council that we just got our schedules for and our deadlines for is our final project. And we're all super excited about it because we have a lot of room to work with it and survey students. So what our project is each student gets to decide on whatever question they would like to ask 100 kids in their grade specific. And we had questions like, how connected do you feel to the school? Would you be interested in joining esports teams? Or how often do you feel stressed out during the year? Just any question that we feel interested in and we feel would have good feedback from our peers. And we get to do a presentation on the survey results, analyze the data, and then come up with ways to fix a problem that we might see. And so that's our final for this semester in Student Council. We're super excited about that because we always want to make people excited about coming to school and have new ways for students to feel like they belong at school and feel motivated to continue going to school, because I know it's even hard for me to want to get up every day and just come and feel like some classes I feel like I'm not really doing much, and I know it's hard for a lot of students, and especially seniors. We all get senioritis, and so I feel like it's another way for us to stay connected with our peers, being student council, when we have like a stigma towards student council kids being unapproachable and kind of in their own clique. And so I think it's another good way for us to branch out and make students know that they do have a voice, they do have a say in what we do around the school, because a lot of students have said, student council just does whatever they want. They don't care about what we want, but they also don't know like the behind the scenes of all the decisions that we have to make. And so I'm really excited about this project, because I feel like it'll give students an opportunity to voice their opinion more in a different way that will actually get feedback, because one of the requirements is having to talk to students face to face. We can't like send out a Google survey. We have to introduce ourselves and create conversation with students within our grade. And I feel like that'll be a really good way for us to kind of build more connections between each other and make it so we're more easily approachable to the general student body's eyes. And so that's a few of the things that we're super excited about. And thank you.
Just a question on your survey. Do you have to make sure, there's quite a few of you in student council, that you're each talking to different individuals?
Yes, so one of the problems that we've came across is, what if we talk to the same people, and what if we ask the same types of questions? And so being that we kind of have a lot of the same friend groups, Ms. Kogel made the requirement to be 100 students at the least. And so typically people aren't going to talk to the same 100 students within the grade. So we feel like even having the opportunity to just branch out and like forcing us to step out of our comfort zones and talk to the limit of 100 people, it'll make it so we get more types of students instead of just, the cliques that we typically stay in.
So thank you so much for your leadership and your voice and the effort to include all. I really appreciate that. I want to ask, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, and if you're not comfortable, just say no, thank you, and we'll talk about it later. But yesterday, there was an activity in your leadership class, and I'd love to hear your perspective on how you thought that went, or if you'd be interested in talking about that at all.
So yesterday we talked to 3 representatives from the legislature in Oregon, from the people that are within or near our district. And there was 3 representatives there, and they kind of asked us, what do we wish we had more of in David Douglas? And some of our students, we had a few student council members from different backgrounds to give more of a better answers to the questions that they asked. And some of our students talked about how they wish we had more mental health resources, resources for the students that are possibly battling depression and stress, but also children and students that have like autism and more mental disabilities. And that was one of the things that my peer she advocates for, and she's really involved in programs that help those types of students, especially because of her younger siblings and people in her family. And so she's really connected to those type of problems that we face here. And then another thing that we talked about was how we wish we had more of, granted we do have so many electives and opportunities, but we wished we had some more hands-on experience, like how other schools within our conference have medical opportunities to go really do hands-on training in either like any type of medical field, dentistry, physical therapy, stuff like that, physicians. And we don't really have, we have health sciences, but then we don't really have anything further than health sciences for those students that do wish to be more hands-on and more narrow in their field of study. And so I brought up that a lot of students, like, they get really stressed out and have a lot of anxiety when it comes to junior and senior year because they have no idea what they want to do when they go to college. They don't have an idea of what they want to study, and I was one of those students. I had no idea, and so I wish we had more of an opportunity to try hands-on real-world jobs so that our students could have a better understanding of what they might be going into if they do choose to go into pre-med or pre-law or something of that nature, because of how much time it takes to achieve those diplomas. And so we talked about that, and those were our two biggest points of discussion with the representatives.
Thank you.
And I'll just add briefly, again, I really appreciated what you shared yesterday, and I'm hoping that you can pass along the thank you to your fellow classmates as well. The piece that I wanted to make sure we were highlighting was that the representatives, and it was Representative Alyssa Kenney-Geyer, Representative Hernandez, and Representative Bonham, they were giving a tour to Representative Bonham here locally. They spent so much time with the students. They were actually pretty significantly late to the other portion of their tour, but I think it's just indicative of how much incredible feedback you all had for them, and really thoughtful questions regarding your education, and really being youth-led learning. And so I was really blown away by everything that you all were saying, and I know that they were as well, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
And you know you're welcome to stay for the whole meeting, but we understand if you want to leave. Okay, the next item on our agenda is attendee input. Remember, you have 3 minutes, and first on the list is Mandy Hurley. Did I get that right?
Good evening. My name is Mandy Hurley. This is my 11th year as the ERCO Sun Site Manager at Gilbert Park. However, I am here not as a representative of Gilbert Park School or of ERCO, but as a voice and advocate for the Sun Site managers in this school district. We know that the district is putting a focus on equity, and as Sun managers, this is our goal as well. We are here to help our families bridge disparities. However, an advocate for equity can only be treated inequitably for so long. Let me take a step back and remind you how our Sun schools are funded. Sun schools are funded by Multnomah County. Each school is given a lump sum, basically the same amount of money per school, by the county. Lead agencies, such as ERCO, MFS, or SEI, are then contracted to spend that money and hire a site manager. So salaries for Sun managers are subject to the pay scales of that agency, and there are 5 agencies in this district. This is one way discrepancies and inequities in pay for Sun site managers occur across this district. For example, a Sun site manager may be at one school for, say, 10 years, work really well with the principal, be considered a vital part of the school, yet get paid less than a brand new site manager at the next school because that site manager is employed by a different agency who has a different pay scale. And I just want to say, on a personal note, and even knowing the politics and reasoning behind it, it's hard not to see that as a message that this district does not value dedication in its Sun site managers. As we are not employed by the district, I cannot ask you all for raises. I know that if we were employed by the district, we would have union representation, we would enjoy more time off, and have a salary schedule we could refer to. In fact, according to the DDSD salary schedule, we should be getting 2 to 3 times what we make currently. Many Sunsite managers take on major leadership roles in the school, such as development and implementation of the school improvement plan, leading all family involvement, facilities maintenance, and, most shockingly, the safety of the entire school building and everyone inside of it after school hours. We have master keys to the school and are given administrators access to Synergy. If you were to look at job description and duties alone, the role of a Sunsite manager more closely resembles that of a principal than that of a teacher. However, it may surprise you to know that the veteran-most Sun manager in this district is paid less than a first-year teacher who has no experience with or knowledge of this community. Like I said, I can't just ask you for a raise. You're not my employer. What I'm asking is for district support and advocacy for our Sunsite managers when creating collaborative agreements with the county and lead agencies. One thing we are always told is that Sun managers are part of the school community, that Sun is not a program separate from the school, but a system of supports integrated within the school. A message needs to be sent that this district cares about their Sun managers and wants to see them treated equitably. We know that the district is looking for longevity in site managers. We know that Sun schools are more successful when they have consistent leadership and low turnover. A large part of our job is building trust in families, and this takes years. This district, our families, and our students deserve this. Help us help this community grow and thrive by insisting that Sunsite managers in this district have a more robust and equitable pay scale across schools. A pay scale that rewards dedication, professional development, and tenure, all things that are valued in this district. Help us create equity within our school communities by advocating for equitable pay for Sunsite managers. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm assuming you're reaching out to the county and the city, since that's where most of the funding goes, is what?
That's where the funding comes from. I'm just asking for your support and advocacy in creating more of an equitable pay scale from the county and lead agencies, since you are our biggest partner and we spend more time in the district and in our schools than we actually do with the county or our lead agencies.
Okay, well, I'm just wanting to make sure you're reaching out to them too, since we don't control the
Yes,
purse
they are
strings
completely
on this.
been reached out to.
Okay.
We only get blown off for so long before we have to look at hire people with a little more power and say to be on our side.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Chris Conklin.
The district leadership works hard to distract us from discouraging numbers. They focus our full attention on Mill Park's incredible growth numbers, but completely downplay student achievement scores on the same test. Derek and Andy both called out the strong growth at Mill Park, but Mill is actually our worst performing school in the district. Over 3/4 of this school will never reach graduation due to their actual academic performance. But we hear nothing about this problem. Andy boasted about Mill. 5 level 5s are so rare that most schools in the state never achieve this level of growth. If we were tricked by his glowing statements, it must be because we do not understand that the state actually grades growth on a massive curve. The actual achievement of Mill children is in the bottom 5% of children in the state. That means their growth score is graded against the same lowest performance group of children. Grading our failing children against the other failing children only tells us how close to the bottom they are. Rather than share Andy's excitement at the news of a 5, we need to be honest about how little that means for the children of failing schools. For them, 5 actually means we did not expect this improvement in our Mill children, since most of their illiterate peers are not growing that much. Andy, if you or anyone else in this room is excited about this kind of growth, you have grown comfortable with the across-the-board failure for Mill Park kids now and in their future. 3rd grade is referred to as a watershed year for learning. Most of the research out there shows that we learn to read up to 3rd grade, and after 3rd grade, we rely on our reading skills to continue learning. Generally speaking, kids who don't read by 3rd grade don't graduate. Are we really okay with the 19 more years of this level 5 growth that it would take to bring the Mill Park 3rd graders on track to graduate? I'd like to take a moment to show how growth has not meant much for Mill Park up till now, to snap our thinking away from the mirage that is created by the word growth, let's just convert level 5 growth to actual numbers of children who couldn't read or do math last year. If we assume, for instance, that Mill has 90 third graders, that'd be 3 classes, then how many in 2017 do you think could read? 11? 11 could read. And how many do you think could do math? 8.5. 8.5 out of 90 could do math at their grade level. Okay, so then in 2018, with a stunning level 5 growth, guess how many additional children are crossing the line to proficiency? 4 more children can read, and 2 more third graders can perform math at their grade level. Is this really what you pictured when Andy gushed about level 5 growth? The grand total with new growth, 15 out of 90 can read, and 11 out of 90 can do their math. Is this truly the good news that Andy wants us to celebrate? Andy colored his speech to you by saying, we want to be the best at getting better. But I say, how can you get better when you won't even admit you have a problem? We need to get real with each other about how serious this problem is at Mill, and that by ignoring these children, it's having a ripple effect throughout the district. If I were Andy, I would say instead, we need to get better at getting better, and that means first admitting that we are not doing well.
Thank you. Darla Black.
Hi, my name is Darla Black, and I'm the president of OSCA Chapter 40, the Classified Union. And I'm just here today to say thank you to the board and recognize their service and dedication to David Douglas, and present you with a check for the DEAF. Sorry, I said that wrong, Dave. I'm sorry. Thank you. And just to say thank you, so that's it.
Thank you. The foundation always appreciates your donation, and this money definitely always goes back to the kids and the staff here at David Douglas.
Madam Chair, if you don't mind, I just want to reach out and thank Darla, and I see Becky back there, and I'm sure there's a few other classified employees, but just being part of the team every single day, from safety to support, you're an integral part, from feeding to transportation. The bottom line is we all can't do what we can't do, or we all can't do what we do, excuse me. Apparently I do better with smaller groups too, Darla, but we can't, or maybe not, I don't know. But the bottom line, I want to say thank you for all your hard work, for every classified employee in this district. Just do a tremendous amount, and we know that's for our kids, and we're a better district because of it. So thank you.
That's it. We don't have any visiting delegations today?
No, they're going to be under the recognition.
Okay, then I guess should I turn the recognition over to you?
Absolutely. So Julie, are you and your group want to come up? Please, I think we have 3. And do you mind if I tee it up a little bit, Julie? Just have a quick introduction. Okay, so, and I'm going to be real brief because I don't want to steal any thunder at all, but board, I hope you'll recognize out there a little bit of tone of color, and I believe that color's red, and there it is, I like it. I believe they'll talk about it more, but red for Ed, and a lot of those individuals wearing red out there this evening, although I see a few admin too, are our teachers, which also, before we even get started, I want to thank every single one of you for your commitment, passion, dedication on what you do for kids. Now, with that said, the reason you're here, I believe, is to communicate a little bit about a resolution that went through DDEA, and some background for the board is that Julie and DDEA leadership came to me and said, hey, we passed this resolution to really communicate to our government and our electeds that we value education, and we need education funded at an appropriate level so we can invest in our system, invest in our kids, invest in our community. And with that said, Julie asked, would our board be interested, or would they support the same type of resolution? At which point, we do have a resolution on the agenda tonight to look at and discuss. We haven't got to that part yet, but before we get there, I don't know if I invited or Julie asked, but one way or the other, we're here, I think, for you to communicate a little bit about some of the needs, the support, and ultimately how we might be able to partner in a resolution.
And I just have a copy of ours. Good evening. My name is Carrie Tursick. Thank you for being here this evening.
I have taught in both general and special education for 16 years. I've been at Earl Boyles for the last 10 years, and I've been their student behavior specialist for 4 years. I'm here today because I am passionate that all students receive quality education, both academic learning and social emotional supports. Every child deserves access to support levels that meet their individual needs, regardless of their age, label, or eligibility. Over the last 10 years, the dynamic of students coming into our schools has changed greatly. I'm sure that every educator who has been teaching more than a decade has noticed this change. With the change in students and families must also come a change in what and how we provide services. It is not enough to have a warm, dry building with desks and as many books as a student might need. Every student deserves to have a quality education in a safe and accepting environment. This environment may not look the same for all students. Unfortunately, our students are coming to us today with not only varying levels of learning needs, but also a diverse array of social emotional needs. As a district, we should stand prepared to serve those needs by having the curricula and training in social emotional growth, trauma-informed practices, and different learning styles and environments. Students should not have to wait for a team of adults to determine that they are eligible for special education to receive their support. It is not enough to complete FBAs and to provide students with point cards in their classrooms. Our students need smaller class sizes so they can have a quality adult interactions. They need explicit instruction in social interactions and friendship skills. They need lessons in tools for emotional regulation. They need explicit instruction on how to acquire and maintain a growth mindset. They need explicit instruction on tools to maintain focus and persistence. And they need lessons and supports for growth and executive function skills. Not only do our teachers, instructional assistants, and school staff members need training and curricula to provide supports in these areas, they also need tools and understanding of how to support the students' families. Additionally, 3 of our 9 elementary schools have public preschool, but that leaves 6 of our neighborhood school catchment areas without the same opportunity of growth for their 3- and 4-year-olds. I chose to work in David Douglas 10 years ago because we were truly a student-centered district. I ask that we continue to be so by meeting our students and families where they are. I ask that our district stay focused on providing teachers and instructional assistants training to provide our dynamic students with dynamic classrooms. I ask that the board support the efforts to have ample and sustainable funding for all students preschool through our transitioning 21-year-olds.
Good evening. My name is Laura Middendorf. I've been a math science teacher in the David Douglas District since 1999, and I've been teaching for 23 years, math and science at both the middle and high school level. This is the 4th district that I've taught in, so I think I have a lot to compare. I'm currently fortunate enough to work with an amazing staff at Ron Russell Middle School who bring their best every single day for kids. Thank you very much for listening to what we're sharing with you tonight. All of us in the room have the same goal, to give our kids the best education that we can and to set them up for success as they become adults in our community. I would like to briefly share with you the ways that disrupted learning affects our students' ability at the secondary level to receive the education that they need and deserve. After speaking with educators from all areas across our district over the last couple of years, DDEA leadership is aware that disrupted learning is a concern for all of our educators. We are seeing staggering increases in expulsion hearings, health room visits, and the number of both academic and behavioral referrals that are written by staff members concerned about kids. As state funding has remained millions of dollars lower than needed, class sizes have increased, but more importantly than the class sizes going up are the needs of our students that are in those classes. Increased numbers of students have special needs, language needs, IEPs, as well as health needs. These students deserve, and we know they are entitled, to have their needs met. Teachers are doing the best that they can to meet the needs of all of their students in their classes. Disrupted learning makes this impossible for us to do. When staff must repeatedly stop instruction to address severe student behaviors, everyone's learning is put on hold while staff tries to redirect, counsel, and at times plead with behavior issues and with the students that are causing them. Many times teaching aids must be used to deal with disruptive behaviors rather than being able to spend their time with the special needs students that they were hired and trained to assist. Students feel the tension of these events occurring in their classrooms. It takes quite some time to calm the rest of the class down after a student has escalated. The students causing the issues are not the only ones that are losing instruction time. The entire rest of the class loses instruction time too. The rest of the class becomes very withdrawn, and it can take a long time to reestablish a positive learning climate. During our last round of bargaining, Superintendents Richardson and Wallace acknowledged the need for teachers to use some instruction time to build and foster more positive classroom relationships. And this was very much appreciated. We are doing this again, but that too takes away instruction time that students receive. Staffs know that the office is overloaded with students that are blowing out of classes. We try our best to handle the issues ourselves, but again, that too takes away from instruction time from the rest of our class. When we do call the office for an escort or assistance of some sort, sometimes calls are not answered because the office staff are all very busy dealing with other behavior issues and student needs. Feeling safe, both emotionally and physically, is a basic human need. Not only are we dealing with student-on-student fights, we're also dealing with daily outright disrespect and defiance. Additionally, we have students attempting to physically and verbally intimidate adults. When students witness other students doing this to adults, it adds to how unsafe they feel themselves. In many of our buildings, there are a small number of students who cause the majority of our disrupted learning. For some of these students, we are forcing them into a school system that does not and will not work for them and their needs. Our district has succeeded in creating interventions for reading. We've created interventions for math. Those interventions have been successful and well worth the effort and money that we've put into them. They are reaching many students. However, many times those are also the classes where disrupted learning most frequently occurs and where it most affects other students' ability to learn. We do, though, have no interventions for behavior, especially at the middle school level. People can get by as adults if they have low math skills and if they have low reading skills, but they cannot get by and be successful if they have behavior issues that are not treated or coped with. Because of a lack of resources at this point, we're putting a Band-Aid on those issues and we're handling them in a reactionary manner. Staff and resources are pushed to the breaking point. People who choose to go into education have huge hearts. We feel like we are giving our best, but that is no longer good enough to meet the needs of our kids. And that makes a lot of us feel really, really bad. In my building alone, our administration and staff continue to be innovative, using the resources that we have and constantly searching for new ideas. For instance, at Ron Russell, we have a very strong PBIS system. Our administration collaborates weekly to come up with supports to help our biggest disruptors. We have extended advisories once a month to help our kids identify and deal with the issues such as stress and handling conflict. What I've shared with you tonight leads back to one issue, and that's funding. And that's where I will pass this presentation back to Julie Talley, our DDEA president. Thank you for listening.
Hi, good evening. My name is Julie Talley, and I'm a high school art teacher here, and I've been in the David Douglas District for 24 years, but this is my 30th year of teaching, and I'm the David Douglas Education President. In honor of Oregon School Board Recognition Month, I want to first thank all school board members for your service to our district and for giving DDA the chance to speak here tonight about a very important topic, school funding. I am here along with Carrie, Laura, and the other David Douglas educators present in the room on behalf of all district educators who are members of the David Douglas Education Association. Over the last 30 years, we have seen a trend toward disinvestment in education in this state, and together we need to address the current opportunity we have to make a significant change in that. We know that our students are the ones who pay the ultimate price for the lack of adequate funding in Oregon's education system. Class sizes are still too large in many schools, and at all levels, students need access to social and emotional programs, electives, mental health services, and behavior supports to address disrupted learning. As an association, we have supported campaigns designed to secure more stable funding for our schools. Some of these have included dedicating the corporate kicker to education in 2014, the Measure 97 campaign in 2016, and the legislative push for corporate revenue increases in 17 and 18. The quality education model was Oregon's answer to the problem of education funding, but the state has never met its own guidelines. As educators, we cannot stand by any longer and watch this disinvestment continue. This year, we have a unique opportunity to work together to fully fund education in Oregon. We have a governor who has set the baseline for education at $200 million more than the forecast, and she also has added an investment package of $2 billion more on top of that. That is 91% of the QEM, which is closer than we have ever been before to fully funding education in Oregon. We have supermajorities in the Oregon legislature, plus the Senate President and House Speaker have pledged to create a dedicated revenue package to education. It is up to all of us to keep them focused on following through with this funding. They have to do this. School boards across the state are being asked to join their voices with educators to say enough is enough. It's time for Oregon to keep the promise to our kids and fully fund our schools. We hope you will join us in adopting a resolution of support for increasing Oregon public school funding. The DDA resolution reads as follows, and I gave a copy to everyone if you want to follow along. Whereas Oregon has one of the largest average class sizes in the nation, and whereas Oregon has one of the lowest graduation rates in the nation, and whereas Oregon has one of the shortest school years in the nation, and whereas strong public schools strengthen families, the local community, and grow the economy, and whereas students in our public schools face challenging learning conditions due to lack of resources, and whereas our educators and our community are doing the best they can for our students given a lack of resources, and whereas staffing schools with more adults provides increased individual attention for students, and whereas the social and emotional development of students are important prerequisites to academic learning, and whereas special education teachers, counselors, school psychologists, social workers, and nurses have caseloads that are significantly higher than professional recommendations, and whereas funding for art, music, library, health, and physical education are limited and programs have been reduced or cut, and whereas student enrichment programs and extracurricular activities have been reduced or cut, and whereas without change, our students will not succeed to their fullest potential, and whereas our students can't wait, and whereas Oregon students deserve better, now therefore be it resolved that the David Douglas Education Association Executive Board will support and encourage efforts to sustainably and amply fund Oregon public schools by increasing state revenue. The board adopted this on December 5th, 2018. Again, I want to thank all of you for your time and support as we begin our journey to try and increase and sustainably fund public education in Oregon. Thank you.
I forgot I turned it off. Thank you. Did you want to say something, Ken?
I would like to just real quickly to also say thank you and just echo a couple things. And one is to the board, I believe that we are a great district. And one of the reasons I believe we're a great district is because of our people, our community, our employees, our kids. There's a lot of different factors. But I want to go back to the people and the teachers and staff. I heard the word heart. I heard the word believing in kids, support, what's right. And I truly believe that. I can look and just about every one of you draw a picture of where I've seen you give a kid a hug, see you high-five a kid and say, come on, we got this, see you hold them accountable and push them knowing, no, you can do it and you understand this vocabulary, whatever it is. I even see someone in the back that I saw leading a marshmallow race, but I won't point them out. But just the other night we're up at Sandy High School seeing the girls varsity get a victory. So my point is I want the board to hear that the support, the belief in students and what our teachers do, and this is a small sample for kids every day, is tremendous, and them asking for help and support I think is real. I personally believe is real. I think it's needed, and I want to add a little piece here, not to be negative, but that piece that we didn't hear a lot about, that trauma that our kids are bringing, those difficult situations and the capacity to help weighs heavily on our teachers. There, I believe, such a thing as secondary trauma. The idea that I am trying to help all these kids in this one, not only do I feel and own I'm not reaching this one, but I'm also not reaching these others, because it's just not working, and that weighs very, very heavily when we feel like we're not supporting. So I want to recognize that. I want to thank all of our teachers and educators for continuing to do our best every single day, no matter what, and giving it your all, because I do believe it makes a difference. I think we'll just be that much better when we do get the funding, but I know today that our kids are in amazing hands every day, and I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. I know you definitely have OSBA's support and COSA's support that we're all planning to push to get the funding we need. And we know we have our issues here with our children and the trauma that can happen in school. But what was interesting when the legislators went around the state, they found it in every corner of the state. So hopefully they heard that we need these extra social funding for social issues that at one time our schools didn't have to provide, but now unfortunately we do. So hopefully together we can get something done this year. Thank you. We also have a resolution. I don't think I need to read it all, do I? I don't think so. It's in your packets. I would like to have a motion to approve the resolution.
So moved.
A second?
Second. I have a comment.
Okay, that's fine.
Discussion.
That's discussion.
I know we talked last time, but I'm not seeing basically the change between DDEA's and ours is the last 5 words by increasing state revenue.
Right.
So I am a little bit concerned that that's not in there, and particularly because it's actually in the title, but then it's not, again, stated at the end. So my preference would actually be to add that back in, and I'm happy to do that in an amendment.
Is there any objection?
Well, I would say that, the support, the line that you referenced, that it's in the title, support for increasing Oregon public school funding. That, to me, says that we're asking the legislature and the governor to prioritize, and I don't think anybody would disagree, to prioritize the spending in the state and give education what it needs. It doesn't necessarily mean increasing the taxes that are already a burden in the state. Let's prioritize and give education what it needs. And so I would be not in favor of changing our resolution.
Comment?
I appreciate both of your outlooks on that, honestly. I read this resolution, and when I read resolved, right, when I read that last part after having read the whole thing, for me, the request that we're going to support and encourage efforts to sustainably and amply fund Oregon public schools, that goes beyond whether we've increased revenue or not. To me, that's it right there. We need to sustainably and amply fund them. If there's a downturn, I'm tired of hearing repeatedly, well, we're going to take equally from everything because we don't want to hurt certain services. Totally understand. But everybody has their thing. My thing is education. So I don't want to tie it necessarily to, yes, we raised revenue. I want to simply say we need to prioritize this. And I'll save the rest of it. So for me, I don't need it changed. If it had come to me with that change, I'd still be behind it. So
yeah, and I think and I remember that we talked about this last time, and I have to say I'm pretty compelled by the testimony and the turnout, and do agree that an increase is necessary. Now, I think we can speculate at this point about how and where that increase comes from. Certainly, a conversation that we don't have to be part of. But I think the advocacy still needs to be there. And so for me, I would really like to make sure that we have the opportunity to advocate for that. And so, again, I would like to make that amendment.
We need a second on the amendment.
I would like to second that amendment. This is Stephanie Stevens.
I forgot to mention, I've got Stephanie on the phone here. She's in Chicago. So yeah, I forgot she was there. Yeah, we kind of forgot you were there, Stephanie. Anyway, okay, the resolution's been amended, and that amendment has been seconded. No, I don't think that's what she's got there.
Well, the sentence looks the same until sustainably and amply fund Oregon Public Schools. Basically, the amendment is the addition of the 4 other words by increasing state revenue.
Okay.
And to clarify, basically, my assumption is also that everything else is the same, so it would be the same resolution as DDEA's.
Okay, any other comments? Oh.
So I guess my only comment is, to me, and this is just the way I read it, to me that says, okay, well, if you didn't increase state revenue, you don't have to worry about increasing funding for schools. And that's a huge concern for me. That's the old, that goes back to what was shared, when they gave their presentation. That's the whole QEM, right? Here's QEM, here it is, this is what we should be doing. But we automatically built in, we don't have to do it. So again, you guys know, I'm gonna vote for this resolution in any of its versions that we're discussing, but to me, it doesn't hinge on whether or not we increase revenue. We need to prioritize schools.
What about if we say by ideally increasing state revenue?
I would be probably more okay with that.
Probably more okay.
Probably more okay. I'll just leave it at that. I'm good with it. My concern is that.
Okay.
I don't want the back door.
That's fair.
Bryce?
At what point could I introduce an additional amendment? Would that be now, or do we have to vote on? Yeah. But if I introduce an additional amendment, would it override the amendment that Andrea's proposing if that was approved? In other words, do you want me to say since we're discussing an amendment, maybe it's best just to discuss what. I would say please don't propose something, just discuss something, and then we can sort that out. Don't propose something? I would say right now, we're in discussion on this amendment. Okay, well, since we're discussing the last 4 words of the DDA's proposal, maybe I would like it to say something about the prioritization of the existing, or prioritizing state spending to put education at the top of the list. Something like that. I don't know if, I'm just thinking about that sitting here tonight.
If we're going to throw out all our ideas, I would like to change it to say, amply fund Oregon Public Schools to fund at the QEM level.
Oh, at the QEM level.
Say that again.
Amply fund public schools by increasing funding to meet the QEM level of funding.
By increasing state revenue to fund QEM level.
I don't care if they increase revenue or not. I think that they should fund at the QEM level today. And
I understand.
I would actually like them to rewrite the tax code.
Yeah,
but that's not where we're going with this. So
I understand what Kyle's saying, because they have taken the out that we don't have the funds, so we're not going to give it to you. So I think rather than that's their job. They figured out how to do it with transportation. So let's let them figure out how to do it with education. But essentially, that's who would do it. But I do like the idea of the QEM.
Yeah, and I also like it, but I also think that the other piece is important as well. So I would be interested in seeing a combination of the two, and then Okay, that's fair. And then to kind of piggyback off of what you had said, Bryce, I would, the way that I do read this, I also do see your point included in that the increasing state revenue, it doesn't say where it would be coming from. So I think you could still read it as, and I think you can, put on the record that the intention is that there is a prioritization of current resources to make that happen, regardless of kind of where the revenue is coming from.
Yes, but I'm one that would think that words mean something, and that if we just kind of leave it open, then it becomes highly malleable to whatever group or people want to try to change things. So I appreciate that, Andrea. I really do. And I do like what Christine said, and I think I could. Well, without putting the cart before the horse, I think I like what she said.
She's scribbling there.
So, I'm just going to read the whole section. I am moving to amend the resolve to state, resolve that the David Douglas School Board will support and encourage efforts to sustainably and amply fund Oregon Public Schools by ideally increasing state revenue to fund at QEM level. Oh, I'm sorry.
So before that, I will say this. So I say yes because you can increase revenue in a variety of ways. It is not literally always at the tax. There are other ways to increase revenue. So the way that's stated, and I hear it, my red flag does not go up. That's just me, though.
Are you fine with the amendment rewritten?
I'll second.
Okay.
So now if we're doing Robert's rules, now is when if you had something that you wanted to preclude the amendment we are voting on, now you bring it up. To change, because we've come to yes, that's just how it works. So now we're at a place to now we're about to vote. So if you want something brought up, you have the opportunity, because we're still in conversation, to propose an amendment.
Yeah, so I don't think we need the words in to get the message across. I don't believe we need the words increasing revenue or whatever those words were. I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me, but I would like to see that taken out. I think that what Christine said was a good compromise, because we're as a board, we are saying that we want education to be prioritized and funded at that QEM level. Period.
Are you?
And the legislature is going to get all these resolutions from all the districts around the state or whatever. And they're going to do what they're going to do. They're going to, either increase taxes, or they're going to increase fees, or they're, like you said, there's a variety of ways. But anyway, without getting into a big discussion on that, I think that's a compromise that we should all be able to live with.
And to your point, I'll reiterate that you're right in that is a decision that the state will make, and this language does allow them to continue to make that decision. And we've included Christine's addition.
But we're taking out the... No, you have to make an amendment. It's been amended and seconded to put it with the...
So I would propose that we amend the amendment by removing the words increasing revenue. I'm sorry, you wrote it down.
It's written in the DDA one.
Okay, by increasing state revenue.
Okay.
Those would be removed, I'm not amending this. I'm amending what you
right. Yeah,
proposed.
that's what.
Yeah,
we understand. So there is a motion, but you need a second. Do I have a second? Okay. Okay, it fails for lack of a second. Back to the amendment, right. Okay, so we have the amended, now we vote on this. All those in favor say aye.
Madam Chair. Could we have it read one more time before we, when we know, I mean, not the whole thing, but just the
IB result.
Yeah.
You'll be able to.
Lori's got it.
I gave my copy to.
Resolved that the David Douglas School Board will support and encourage efforts to sustainably and amply fund Oregon public schools by ideally increasing state revenue to fund at QEM level. But we're, yes.
Okay, you got it? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
We heard you, Steph.
No.
Okay. You got that, Lori?
Yep.
Okay, passes. Okay.
Follow-up comment, if I may?
Yes, you may have.
Thank you so much.
Didn't-
Oh, is the
First
pendulum
time on it.
swinging, and I am so happy. Okay. I have sat on this board for a little while compared to others. And
He's looking
I
at
have been told every election cycle that my representatives were going to prioritize education. To my face, every time. And every time that budget comes out, they're so full of. So I'm super excited that we are at this point where it is just becoming overly apparent that it cannot be ignored, because, as Ken mentioned, if we have to deal with the trauma, which goodness gracious, all right? I know a lot of you, okay? I know your hearts. We're going to deal with it. But if we have to deal with it, we have to be funded in a way that we can. Otherwise, it will not work. So I'm super excited to see the work that's being done, super excited to see the advocacy that's going to be happening, and this board knows that, tongue-in-cheek, I always think it's going to happen. I think actually, possibly, maybe this is the time. So I appreciate your work. Thank you very much.
Well, I hope we can all advocate, being the fact that it has become very apparent we need mental health professionals within our school. And right now, the county receives the funding for all mental health, that maybe they may look at how they allocate funding so it goes where it can reach the children when they're really young.
I just wanted to say thank you all so much for bringing this to our attention and for the advocacy that you all are doing both here and in the state. I'm really excited about this session. Continue to push us and engage us in this exciting opportunity for our students. So thank you for being here.
Okay, we ready for the next thing? Does Pat want to introduce our guests?
I'd like to welcome Ann Sherman with Hawkins, Delafield, and Wood. She has been our bond counsel in the past and hopefully in the future. And also Carol Samuels. She tries to keep us in line with the laws. And Carol Samuels, who you see her smiling face many times before, and she helps us sell our bonds. You had asked for some the ability to ask some questions and some information on bonds in anticipation of going out in the near future. And they have so graciously come tonight and prepared a little presentation for you. And then you are welcome for Q&A. You're on.
Well, good evening, everybody. It's nice to see all of you again. I am Carol Samuels. I'm with Piper Jaffray, and as Pat mentioned, to my right is Ann Sherman. We are partners in many activities related to schools. The good news about this presentation is the state has nothing to do with it. So we put together a very brief presentation. We hope it's brief. Pat gave us a 20-minute deadline that goes into an overview of how general obligation bonds work, what the rules are in terms of how you can spend the money, and then a quick review of some of the analyses that we've run most recently for Pat and Ken that may or may not fit your expectations, but at least gives you a flavor of what things are looking like right now. So, without further ado, let's just talk generally about general obligation bonds, which are the type of obligation that most school districts, you have to pay it back. And that the debt service, that means the principal and interest, is actually paid back by an additional property tax over and above the property tax that is levied for operating purposes. Because it is an additional property tax, you must ask your voters for their permission in order to levy it. Theoretically, there are 4 election dates at which you can ask their permission. Realistically, the only election dates that school districts in this state pay attention to are May or November, largely because those 2 election dates are subject to what's called the simple majority, which is what most people think of as a majority when you go to the voters. 50% of those who turn out plus 1 voter equals election success. There is theoretically a limit on how much debt you can ask the voters for. Set by state law, it's equal to 7.95% of your real market value. The reason I'm emphasizing the theoretically there's a limit is you can see on the screen for your district as well as most other districts, it's a really big number. So no district in my experience comes anywhere near it. But if you wanted to ask for $576 million, you would have the legal right to do so. Interest on the bonds is typically exempt from both income taxes set by the federal government and the state government. That means that the interest rate you pay is lower than it otherwise would be. So it's kind of a backdoor subsidy that the feds and the state of Oregon provide. However, once you go down the path of selling tax-exempt bonds, there's a whole host of rules and regulations that Anne is going to talk about that you have to meet in order to be eligible. So I always like to spend a little bit of time on math and make you feel the pain that I endure every day. Hopefully it won't be too painful. But I particularly like to focus on bond math because oftentimes I hear representatives of school districts describe the impact of bonds financially incorrectly. And I want to try and steer you in the correct path so people don't yell at you later when you say, it won't cost more than this, and it turns out that it does. So actually, the way levy rates are calculated is pretty basic arithmetic. You start with the amount of principal and interest that is due every year. So that's what we call debt service. You get to then add the amount of delinquencies that you expect, because unfortunately, not all Oregonians pay their taxes on time. Usually they pay them because the consequences of not paying are pretty severe and stiff penalties, but they don't pay them on time. So under Oregon law, you're allowed to take the amount of debt service due and gross it up for a percentage, usually about 5%, representing what you think people won't pay. That number is submitted by Pat and her staff to the county assessor every year. The county assessor then takes the value of the district, in this case the assessed value, and divides. Okay? Simple division. Amount due divided by property value equals the bond levy rate. What that means is that because the assessed value changes every year and you don't know for sure what the change is going to be, I can give you a projection of the bond levy rate, and I will later on in my 20 minutes. But I can't guarantee it, because if the assessed value changes more or less than what I expect, it's going to show up in the varying levy rate. Okay? Just to throw some numbers at you to show you how this can happen. Say you have debt service due of $950,000. You add 5% delinquency, so you get to $1 million. That's what's submitted to the county, and the county is told, go ahead and levy that tax against the value of my hypothetical district, which happens to be $1 billion. That leads to a levy rate of $1 per thousand, which, talking in real dollars, means that if you have an assessed value on your property of $100,000, that's $100 a year. Okay, if it's $200,000, it's $200 a year. Everybody still with me? Okay, we know what the debt service is, so that number is fixed. But what happens if the assessed value actually doubles? You have a really good year. I might have projected $1, but the actual levy rate is going to go down. That's a very happy circumstance that every district should wish for. But the problem is, in catastrophic circumstances, maybe the opposite happens. Maybe your assessed value next year actually drops. If that were to happen, then my projection doesn't seem to work. What would happen? Anybody want to guess? The tax rate would become $2 per thousand. So if you take nothing else away from me tonight, I would just encourage you, whenever you're talking about the impact of a potential bond issue, start using the words estimated. We expect that the levy rate associated with this amount of bonds will be X. Now I'm going to turn it over to Ann, who's going to talk about how you can spend your money.
So, hello, I'm Ann Sherman. I'm a bond attorney, which is a kind of specialized attorney that I deal only with bonds, and at the end of the day, why folks need me is that I give an opinion to investors that your bonds are valid and binding and that they're federally and state tax exempt, unless Christine changes the tax code, which would be really nice. One of the problems with the tax code is, in this context, is that bond proceeds can only be used for capital costs. So as much as, after hearing all of the hard work that the teachers in this district do, I would love to finance operating costs, you cannot do that with bond proceeds. So the state constitution has a much more liberal version of what capital costs you could finance than it used to. So it's basically any capital construction and improvements with a useful life of more than a year. That's much better than it used to be, where you couldn't do any equipment and furnishings or anything. So now you can do equipment and furnishings, anything with a useful life more than a year. You can't do routine maintenance or supplies. The weighted average life of the bonds has to exceed the weighted average life of the projects. That piece is in there because people didn't want folks to finance computers with long-term bonds. You know, the notion is that if you're going out for financing, you should finance something that matches the asset. Bond proceeds and any interest earnings must be used in accordance with the ballot title. Your ballot title ends up being the thing that is most restrictive, so you want to think extremely carefully about the ballot title. So some of the folks who've been here before realize that this has been a bit of a problem in the past. It is a problem for a number of districts where, you know, it's very difficult going into a bond issue to imagine all of the things that you might finance or how circumstances might change. But as Carol said, it's the reason to use expected and estimated and try your very best to try get as many of the details of your financing kind of rounded up so that you say in your ballot title what it is that you want to finance. The ballot title has about 175 words in it that you get to use, and you have an explanatory statement too. But the 175 words is where you really need to lay out what you want to finance. The capital cost definition is broad now, but the statutes also require a reasonably detailed and understandable use of proceeds. We try to put things in there like site improvements, furnishing, and equipping to be broad enough to get a lot of the things in you want. But in terms of the major projects, you really need to put those in the ballot title. The interest earnings that were mentioned in the other slide are also a part of bond proceeds, as is any premium that Carol might be able to get you. GO bonds have been very popular with investors, so sometimes you'll get an extra premium. I get a lot of questions from districts saying, you know, can't I use the interest earnings and the premium for something that wasn't in the ballot title? And the answer is no. So, federal tax rules are applicable only if the bonds are issued as tax exempt. As Carol said, most bond issues in this state are issued as tax exempt because you get a better interest rate on those bonds. The main thing that happens with the federal tax rules is that you can also only use those for capital costs. They can't be used for employee training or operating. If you want to use bond proceeds to reimburse yourselves, your general fund for something you paid for before the bond issue got passed, basically you need to talk to me because there's a special set of language that needs to go into a resolution. The reason for that is the federal tax folks don't want you saying, oh, I'm going to look back 3 years and finance all this stuff that I didn't really think at the time I was going to finance with bonds, but it sounds like a good thing now because I want to get it off my general fund. So there's some rules that you have to comply with. The other big tax law requirement to think about when you're going out for a bond issue is that you have to, when you issue the bonds, have a reasonable expectation to spend the bonds within 85% of the bonds within 3 years. When you go out for the bond issue, you might go out for a huge amount. So, you know, if your Gresham went out for $200 million plus, for example, or Salem Kaiser or PCC, all of these folks are, the size of these bond issues are getting really large. You do not have to issue all of those bonds at once, and many folks don't. North Clackamas issued a portion of them and then issued another portion of them. Part of the reason they don't issue them all at once is because of this tax law. You have to have this reasonable expectation to spend 85% within 3 years and 5% within 6 months. And that 5% has to be a substantially binding contract or have to actually spend. So that can come and bite you. The ways around that are to, again, split it into two groups, which can have, you know, interest risk that goes with that. You can also issue a portion of them federally taxable, so you don't have to comply with that. Investment restrictions, the exciting world of arbitrage and rebate. Arbitrage is just a fancy word for the difference between the rate at which you borrow. So let's say Carol does a fantastic job in the market and gets you a 2% borrowing rate, and you turn around and the local government investment pool is doing an incredible job and they're getting a 4% rate. Not likely, but let's say that was happening. That 2% difference is called the arbitrage, the 2% difference between the 2% that you're borrowing at and the 4% that you're investing at. You can under the federal tax rules, you can always keep the investment earnings up to that original 2% that you're paying, but that extra 2%, that arbitrage, you have to send back to the federal government unless you meet one of the rebate exceptions. The ballot title has to have a not-to-exceed amount in it. You can issue less than that, can issue more than that. It has to have a not-to-exceed maturity, so you have to know how long you're going to go out, and it has to have a description of the identified projects. As Carol mentioned, you can't guarantee amount per thousand. You can provide an estimated amount. If you're going out for an awesome grant, that's one of the grants from the state, the matching fund grants. The projects that are in your ballot title have to also include the grant-funded projects. You do not have to list out which projects are coming from grants and which for bonds.
Finally, before we get to the numerical analysis, this is just a snapshot of the election timeline for the next couple of cycles. As I said before, most districts focus on May or November. If by some chance you thought you wanted to go this May, it's pretty much too late. So I'd say move on. Next November, the timing is the first draft of the ballot title has to be submitted to the county. I think there's a pointer here, by August 16th. That's actually earlier than it used to be, largely because the Secretary of State has added a new requirement for a new document that is essentially your final ballot title. So if you were interested in doing a November election, since it's hard to get things put together in the summer, you basically have to have all your decisions made by, say, the previous June in order to have a realistic shot. May election, if you were looking at May of 2020, again, the timing for submitting the ballot title to the county has been moved up a bit. It's now the end of February, with the final ballot title being submitted in March. So just be aware of that, and check with your county in particular to make sure that our dates are their view of how to count 60 days prior to the election. How are we doing on time, Pat? Okay. So I'm very, very briefly going to show you a few sets of numbers that we've run recently. These have not been updated for current interest rates. They have not been updated for your current assessed value, but they'll give you an idea. This first chart is simply a historical look back at the value of the district. There are multiple definitions of property value in Oregon just to keep everybody as confused as possible. The one you want to focus on is the assessed value, because that's the value against which taxes are assessed. Okay? And Frida, in this case, it would be the total assessed value, because new GO bonds are not against the urban renewal excess. Okay?
That's only our old ones.
I know. This is a listing of all of the bonds that the district has had outstanding since back in 1993. Those bonds were then refinanced in 2002. Those have been paid off. That's why there's no value. You issued bonds in 2001. Those were refinanced and have been paid off. So effectively, the only bonds that are still outstanding date from 2012, which were refinanced in 2015. The district roughly has $52 million in bonds outstanding, which will be paid off in 2032 overall. This is really tiny type, but the key columns to focus on here are, this is the amount of debt you've owed for each of the different series that have been outstanding. The blue line is the current year. You do have a fair amount of debt service remaining. However, we project that your levy rate will begin to decline the year after next. So the current levy rate is about $1.56. We don't have to say estimated in this case, because that's the actual rate that is being paid this year. Next year, we project it will stay about the same, and then the following year, we project it will go down by 20 cents. That's what it looks like graphically. The light blue is your history, and you can see that during the recession, again, assessed values were not necessarily in that case keeping up with projections. your levy rate actually went to about $2.23, I think was the high. Right now, it's at about $1.56. And we project it will decline slightly and then disappear entirely after 2032. So here is 4 different scenarios that we ran under the assumption that you would go for a bond issue in November of 2019. We looked at $60 million in one case with a 20-year repayment cycle. That's the first column. We looked at $60 million with a 30-year repayment, and then we also looked at $100 million, 20 and 30 years again. We then said, what if rather than having just a flat line levy projected, we built in a step down so that if you go for a 30-year bond issue and you are trying to maintain a given levy rate, you're not locked out from going back to the voters for an extended period of time. So in all cases, we assumed a step down of 2030, which would mean that your next election, if you wanted to have a seamless continuation, would be November of 28. So these assume a November of 19 election followed by a November of 28 election, which would be a presidential election. So it wasn't just a random selection. And what you discover looking at the graphs, this is 60 million over 20 years. Because it's a shorter period of time, your levy rate is going to be higher initially than if you go for the same amount of 30 years, but it's going to extend over a longer period of time. These two numbers top out at, in this case, it would go to roughly $2.34 per thousand. Again, on a $100,000 assessed value, that's $234. That includes your existing debt, so that's both issues together. In the 30-year cycle, it's $1.90, which is below the height of where you've been historically. This is slightly above. If you go for 100 million, not surprisingly, the numbers get bigger. And they top out, in this case, at $3.21 over 20 years with a step down. And in this case, it tops out at $2.61. Note that with a step, how high these rates go in part depend on how much of a step you build in. The smaller the step, the less high your levy rate has to be initially. It also depends on how soon you have the step. If you say, I don't need another step that quickly, if you build it 15 years from now, again, that can have implications for how this is shaped. The final thing I wanted to share tonight is how you rank relative to other neighboring districts. Hopefully your taxpayers appreciate that their taxes are actually quite a bit lower than other Portland area school districts. You know, at the very top of the list, it's the district I live in, Portland. Then Gladstone, West Lynn are all above $9. You know, in East County, Gresham is at $7.26. You guys are at $6.20, below Reynolds, and I think Park Rose and Centennial are below you. Note that Centennial is also talking about a bond issue, so presumably if they're successful, their levy rate could go up quite a bit too. And then if you want to see how just your bond rate, your current bond rate tracks with other districts, it puts you more or less in the same position relative to your neighbors. So, that's our contact information. Did we keep close to 20 minutes? We're happy to stick around and answer any questions, but...
I've got a question. I don't know if anyone else does. I'll start. In regard to the urban renewal areas, but it looks like we only have one group that goes out to 32. If
so,
remember your charts right?
As Frida knows better than I, urban renewal is supremely complicated, particularly in Portland, because they have multiple types of urban renewal plans. And even though I said that my belief is that the new bonds would be taxed against the total assessed value rather than the net assessed value, now that I think about it, I'm not sure that's accurate. Because
I've been told that's accurate because I've had discussion with Prosper Portland about it. So I think we're okay there. So it's just our existing bonds.
Your existing bonds are likely, some of them are taxed against the net and some of them are taxed against the total. I do have a table. I did not bring it tonight, and I would be happy to share it with you as to give you the specifics.
I'm concerned about this. There's discussion. We have 90% of Gateway urban renewal in our district and 50% roughly of Lentz urban renewal.
Right.
And there's been discussions at the city level about extending those renewals. I told them at the moment I would be totally against them because it affects our bonding. And if they fell off, it should drop the current rate significantly so that if we did add another bond, it wouldn't be as dramatic of an impact. But I know it's a few years out. They each have about 4 years or so on their life, but then I think it's farther out before they actually fall off and stuff, if I understand it right.
I have no doubt you do, but, but I will get the information.
If you could, because it makes a difference on where I stand on it with Prosper Portland, and I'm getting some pressure about they want to extend those areas. As I told them, I haven't seen any development that they've done in our area, so why should we extend them and support their extension? You know, so trying to get some work done out here that creates a tax base versus all exempt property, which is what they've done in the past in our area. So if you can get me that, I'd really appreciate it.
I will.
Any other questions on bonding?
Tomorrow.
Just a real quick one, and I don't know, just guesstimate. And what that guesstimate, the question I'm going to ask is November of 19, if that was a target date, the kind of point of no return, right? Go, no go. Do you have a suggested date? And I know it's, but just for our board to hear that when would be kind of, we got to be moving forward by now. And I know it's just a suggestion.
Well, there are a couple of ingredients to that that determination. The first ingredient, as I said, is simply having enough time to figure out how you want to spend the money, what projects are your highest priority, getting feedback from your constituents as to whether or not they agree with you. And then figuring out what you want to say in the ballot title. That's one path. I would think that you would want to have a really good sense of what you were planning, maybe not finalized ballot title, but what you were planning by June. The other piece of this is something we haven't talked about tonight, which is the AWESOME program. I think you are very familiar with it. But the timeline for the AWESOME program for November is shorter than it is for other elections, largely because the authorization of AWESOME is dependent on the 19 legislature reauthorizing it. So for the AWESOME program, you would need to submit your assessments and your long-term facility plan. I believe the expectation is by July 1st, and then submit the actual application by July 15th. That also gives you, you know, kind of a set in stone timeline as to whether or not you want to proceed, because hopefully you get, I mean, you guys have a very low prioritization number, low meaning you're very likely to get a grant because you're ranked high. So I've been babbling. I would say having a pretty good sense this spring would be good timing.
Yeah, I second that, because you're going to want to put the ballot title together and have a number of reviews. You have to adopt, the board has to adopt a resolution with that ballot title in it before it gets submitted. If you're going out for an awesome grant, most of the folks, even if they're like first on the waiting list, want to say something about that in the ballot title. So you want to have kind of everything lined up, plus language in brackets that says, you know, we are first on the waiting list, or we've been given an awesome grant, or whatever the language is that's going to be applicable. So yeah, I mean, I think June is, you're going to want to be kind of heading down the path pretty fast in June.
Can you just say what the awesome grant is for the people in the audience and at home? Because it's not awesome like, yay, we're awesome. It's an acronym. So could you say what that is so everybody knows?
It's the Oregon School Capital Improvement Program. Matching program. Yeah. Thank you. We get caught up in our acronyms, so.
Go ahead, Greg.
And do you recall what the maximum limit on it? I believe there's
million.
It's 8.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay if you don't.
It's $8 million for you folks.
8 million.
For David Douglas. There's it's kind of $4 million for the smaller districts.
You basically have to do a bond, so you have something to match, because you have to match it.
I think you guys are eligible for 8.
I think so too.
Usually travel.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
It wasn't as mind-boggling as the last one. Oh, now I got to put.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
So where do we go from here on this?
This was informational item, mainly for you guys to get up to speed on the process. I don't think we potentially would have something on the next month's agenda.
Well, we could have some discussion now. Obviously, there's two things. One is education, bringing up speed, but two is we need to engage in the conversation about, are we going out, are we not going out? You heard the timeline a little bit. We are currently going through the facilities plan, Pat and her team. We shared that at the last bond workshop where we went through kind of the process. So we're putting together, quote unquote, a list of some deferred maintenance, along with other issues that would be new construction. And then at some point, we need to talk about what would that look like? What would the price tag be? Are we interested? And then prioritize to make the final listing. I think part of it, what we would need to talk about is backwards planning of the work involved. I mean, we heard some of the details about the bond language, et cetera, but there's a lot more to that, from polling to connecting to literally going out and PR work. And
usually we do it. Usually you do a survey, because if your survey comes back with less than 50% supporting the bond, you might as well not even go after one. So last time I think we were about 55% when we decided to go for it, because they say you have a good chance if you have at least 55% supporting the bond.
I saw Pat, you grabbed your mic. Did you have something to add, Pat?
We already submitted the facilities assessment to the state, and they accepted that. If you remember, we did get a little grant for part of it. And then we did our long-range plan. We kind of did a little backwards. We did our long-range plan before, and we're actually looking at getting that submitted in advance so that if we need to do any amendments to it, then we'll be ready for any timeline here. So,
any other questions?
So, Pat, question, and maybe, well, Carol's still here. So the maximum levy rate, I don't know if it's rate or percentage, but it's like $7.95. Anyway, my question is this: it's how much room do we have from our existing bonds that we're paying on, and maybe that was given, but I've already forgotten it. How much room do we have to?
You've got a ton of.
There's a lot. Okay.
Trouble. So, just talking raw dollars, you are authorized to have $576 million in GO bonds outstanding. Currently, you have about 52.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
And Carol, if I'm looking at this right, of the 52, the refinance of the 2005 bonds will mature by the end of this year. It looks like 12/1/19. So those will be paid off at the end of this calendar year. Is that what that means?
So this was done. Yes.
So that little bit will be paid off, and
The
then another one
2005 will be paid
and then the series 2012A will be paid off 4 years later.
Right.
So we've got two sets that are getting ready to be fully paid off.
Correct.
So if we go out for a bond in the next year, then it'll kind of be a switch out. I think we did that with the last bond where one was expiring and then we went out for a new one. So the levy rates didn't really change for folks because we were just kind of doing the same thing again.
Exactly. That's why now is a good time to think about this, because your levy rate is about to go down. Okay. Not by a ton, but by enough to make it worth discussing.
And if we sell the bonds in lots, in steps, that would work also.
Well, you said that that would be in about 2 years, so the year after next?
Well, if you sell bonds, if you go on the November 19 ballot, that's the 1920 fiscal year, it will hit the tax rolls the following fiscal year, which dovetails exactly with when your levy rate declines. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions of Carol? Okay, thank you, Carol.
All right. Have a good evening.
You too. Next item is superintendent's report.
Yes, and Madam Chair, very brief this evening. I have 3 things. 2 are kind of business and 1's fun. So the first one, the business one, a reminder to the board, and I did send an email, but it's required that I do it at a board meeting as well. So I don't know why, but I'm doing it. With that said, the board, a reminder to the board, every March, one of the responsibilities of the board is to renew or non-renew all licensed employees. Basically, we always bring you a list of all our licensed employees and say, we're renewing or not renewing. We give a recommendation, the board takes action on that. With that said, that's part of statute, it's law. I'm also a licensed employee. So you do that same action for me in March, and one of the requirements I have is to communicate that to you in a board meeting in January. So I'm communicating to you that this March you need to either communicate with me you're renewing me or you're non-renewing me. So, make sense? Okay. So, second thing is just an announcement to clarify. Tomorrow we have our legislative summit review, legislative budget summit, in which the Multnomah County superintendents are meeting with our electives to kind of go through and talk about the budget, where we're at, what our needs are. And a few of our priorities have to do with school improvement, CTE, facilities, workforce, early learning, and social emotional learning are all topics that we're going to be working with and talking to those legislators that do attend that tomorrow. So I just wanted to give a heads up to the board that I will be there tomorrow. And then the final is a fun. So the fun is for me to recognize and thank each one of you. We've heard it a couple times this evening that it is School Board Recognition Month. And I get the privilege to thank each one of you for your service and for all of your work, your time, your energy, your belief in our school district, and basically all you do to make sure that we're running efficiently, but more than that, to provide an amazing education, I believe, for our kids, for our district, and our community. So I sincerely want to thank you, and part of that thank you, I get the opportunity to read a proclamation. And that proclamation is, whereas Oregonians rely on public education to ensure a prosperous quality of life and strong economic health for Oregon. You guys don't laugh at me here. I need these apparently. Yeah, whereas locally elected boards fulfill leadership roles and serve as a conduit through which teachers, parents, businesses, and communities demonstrate the care, creativity, and support that lead to student achievement. And whereas public schools nurture and train diverse student populations to the best of their ability, whatever the resources, to give students the knowledge, skills, and opportunities they need to succeed. And whereas board members build the framework that makes it possible for education organizations to teach Oregon's children, and whereas the committed men and women who serve on the boards of Oregon's 197 school districts, 19 education service districts, and 17 community colleges deserve recognition and thanks for their dedication to the education needs of the people of Oregon. Now, therefore, and this proclamation was from the governor, but I'd like to support it. It says, I, Kate Brown, but I, the David Douglas School District, the state of Oregon, and our district hereby proclaim January 19th to be School Board Recognition Month, and want to say thank you to each and every one of you. And I want to add one more piece. If you all did receive, for all those in the audience, you know that, but this is a voluntary thing, so a little token of our gratitude. We did get you a gift. Obviously the certificate's a few other things, but we did get every board member a gift, and Stephanie, you will get yours. I won't let someone else take it, but
We're going to be Scotsmen.
yes, you are. You are.
You know, when my granddaughter sees it, she's going to try
Oh,
to
she'll
steal
take
it.
your hat? Yeah, you should put it on. So, no, thank you. Sincerely thank all of you on behalf of the cabinet, on behalf of all of our educators. We're fortunate to have a board that believes in our district and supports, pushes, all of the above. So thank you for your leadership, and I look forward to 2019 being an amazing year.
Thank
That's
you.
it.
Just one question on your legislative meeting tomorrow. Are you mentioning stabilizing housing? Because I thought that came out in at the group that met.
The answer is yes. Those are just some key topics,
Okay.
but yes.
That's what I'm letting people know, that we're behind the housing initiatives as well. So on to our next item is financial report, and I believe, Pat, we have it on our tables here.
Yep, we should have it at your station, and probably the one thing that I'll highlight is the projected ending fund balance for general fund, which is $14.7 million. I do want to highlight we got a CMAQ grant through DEQ. We did an additional 16 diesel retrofits to our buses this past fall. And we did get our 4 new buses in. If you remember, we had a matching grant from EPA of $80,000. And so we're excited to get those and be able to participate with that grant. On the back of this is the investment in cash. As you can see, the cash balances were at $43 million at the end of December. And just probably one thing to note is the local government investment pool is still ticking up compared to the December before at, I believe, 1.7% for interest rate. It was at 2.5% this past December. So we're continuing to see a little uptick in that way. And if you have any questions, since you didn't get a chance really to peruse it too much, don't hesitate to give me an email or a call, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions of Pat? Okay. We'll go on consent agenda item. Does anyone want anything taken off the consent agenda? Okay, do you have a motion to approve it?
Second.
Okay, moved and second to approve the consent agenda of items. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? I keep forgetting you're there, Stephanie. I'm glad you're staying awake.
We did that kind of quickly, Frida, but just for the appointment of Budget Committee Person 6, just to clarify, there isn't actually any paper on that. Any
You don't
physical-
have a paper.
Right, just to clarify for everybody. And I'll also state that Adriana has served previously, and she's been doing a great job.
Okay, next item is Division 22 standards, and I believe that's Brooke.
Yes. So it's our annual Division 22 report to the board, which is required by law. And we're going to do just a review of what Division 22 is and what our process is for reviewing the standards. So basically, Division 22 is the standards for public elementary and secondary schools. Just a little bit of background. State law requires Oregon Public Schools to meet standards as established by the State Board of Education. A school district that operates a school and does not meet the standards may be found deficient by the Deputy Superintendent of Public Instruction, who may impose sanctions on the school district. And then also the State Board has defined a school standard if it meets the requirements of the rules contained in OAR Chapter 581, Division 22. So what the law says is by February 1st of each year, we are required to report to our local school board our district standing with respect to all of the standards for public elementary and secondary schools. So we have to certify if we are in compliance with the standards or if we are not in compliance with the standards. And then if we're not in compliance, we identify the rule where we're not in compliance. And we provide information describing what our improvement plan is going to be so that we get into compliance. And then we need to make sure that we are in compliance by the start of the following year. So you know we had that a few years ago with health, and we addressed that with adding health educators and getting some new curriculum, so that was exciting. It really is an opportunity for us to, every year as new laws come in to look at how we're operating as a district and have really good conversations as a cabinet around that. So the action items that need to happen around Division 22 is we do need the school board to acknowledge that you have received the Division 22 report, which is in your board packet. I will, once that's done, I will post, I don't want to say I mean Derek, we'll post the report to our website by February 1st. And then also there is a report very similar that we complete for the Oregon Department of Ed that we upload, and also we need to include our school board meeting minutes as part of that process. So on that report, it asks, what is the process that your school district goes through in order to determine your compliance with the standards? So you'll see later there are 50 standards that we reviewed this year, and we do that work at the cabinet level. We identify and set aside a lot of meeting time to go through those standards. We go through and we divide them up amongst superintendent, assistant superintendent, and then all the directors for the areas that we oversee. We go back and we do another thorough read of each standard, highlight, we bring it back to cabinet, and then we go through one by one, and we talk about what does that mean to us, how are we interpreting that law, do we, what is evidence that we have, do we believe we're in compliance, and we have discussions around each of those and then determine what we believe to be our final, are we in compliance or not in compliance. So it takes a while for us to do that. It is a thorough process. If we find that we need to go back to a school and ask questions, we allow time to do that and gather any information that we need to do. So you had this report in your packet, but for the audience, you guys can see a little bit from diploma requirements to concussions to dyslexia training, so they're very vast. And again, there are 50 of these standards that we reviewed this year. We did deem that we are in compliance with each of the standards, though we do always look at this as an opportunity to get better and what could we be doing to continue to improve. So for those of you who would ever want to read them, they are posted on the state secretary's website. I'm just going to show you what that looks like real quick. And I will upload this to our website as well. Derek will upload that. So you'll want to go down to Division 22, and there you will see the list. And if you want to click on any of them, then you will go through and you can go through and read what all the requirements are.
So good evening, Rady.
Yeah.
So there's the corresponding 50 items?
Yes. So are there any questions?
Any questions by anyone? Oh, okay.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. So we ourselves go through and assess ourselves whether or not we are an outside entity comes in and makes that assessment?
Not lately. It is written into statute that the Oregon Department of Ed can come out and they can do site visits and check our compliance, and they used to. Way back in the day, funding went away for that. I think you're going to find more scrutiny around that now, and it wouldn't surprise me if they bring that back. But what we do when we sign our report and upload it for the Oregon Department of Ed, Ken signs off as, that we've reviewed it and that we've gone through the process. And then it goes to the State Department. They do have the option to follow up. They have not in some time, but like I said, I think that will be changing.
It's actually been quite a few years. I can remember.
Yeah, they used to do site visits. We get site visits for other things through the Department of Ed, with different audits, but we have not around Division 22.
My understanding is they actually cut the funding to do those follow-up audits. So they, but as Brooke said, I would guess they're adding that back.
Yeah.
Bryce?
Yeah, the last one, alternative education programs. Could you give a quick explanation of what that means, if it's not putting you on the spot?
Well, I think that was...
Gotta find my list. There it is.
So this would refer to some of our education options that are available for students who may not be wanting to engage in more of a mainstream education. So for one example would be our Fur Ridge program, which is our alternative high school. The other is that we have contracts with community-based options for students like Rosemary Anderson High School, Open Meadow, or not, it's not Open Meadow anymore, Open School, programs like that.
Would the charter schools fall under? No.
I think they could, yes. I think I'd have to read through it again, but I think yes. Yes.
Okay. There isn't a separate...
yes.
Okay, that's why we need to spend a lot of time on it.
Any other questions? We don't have to vote on it. It's just we just acknowledge that we've received it. No. Oh, good. Thank you very much, and I'm glad to see us all in compliance. It was hard explaining why we had that one that wasn't, because we were waiting for the new curriculum to go. So, anyway, our next agenda item, our second reading on board policy CMG. Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped over that, didn't I? I was trying to get through the agenda. I forgot about that. Oh, yes. Board meeting procedure discussion. This is a discussion. We've kind of knocked around some ideas about what things go on agendas, the length of the meeting, the meeting minutes, and attendee input. So we thought it would be good to just have an open discussion, because we found out our meeting minutes are too detailed by far. And so based on OSBA recommendations, we should be basically not putting the whole discussion in the minutes, but the motions, which are the important things, and the results. So, and the other thing was Ken, and in fact I laughed because he said we should put times by our agenda items, which a lot of agendas do, and I laughed because we used to do that, so it dropped off and it's not here anymore. So things change, but they come back, and if no one has any objection to it, it helps us keep on track.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
All for it.
All for it.
And in addition, I would love to see like time frames associated with items. So for example, if it was a 20-minute presentation or a 5-minute anticipated.
Understanding that they're estimates within,
right,
give or take 10% or whatever. Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
Okay, the other issue is attendee input. We've had quite a bit of attendee input over the last year. One of the things is our board meetings are business meetings, and it's up to us about attendee input, how much, how long, etc., and how often we want to hear about the same item. And lately we've been hearing repetitively about the same item. And we want to give our community time to provide information to us, but hearing for 6 months in a row the same item when it's already been addressed and the person may not have chosen to meet with the superintendent or whatever has been recommended. So that's kind of a discussion item.
Okay, so I'll just throw out my feeling on it. My honest feeling is that it is a business meeting. It's absolutely, actually fundamentally enjoy hearing from people that have that passion, right? That they have something that they want to come and share. So I have a second part that I'm going to say that comes back to that, enjoying that. But fundamentally, in the business meeting of the board, if that testimony does not reflect comments for something that's on the agenda, it's out of place, plain and simple from my perspective. That does, however, create a barrier, create some difficulty sometimes. Certainly, every one of us, our contact information is public. Anybody can get things to us, but that's not as impactful sometimes as being able to come and present. So while I am open to all types of suggestions and certainly will always defer to board leadership, my feeling is if testimony is not reflective of the agenda, it shouldn't be at the business meeting, and the board should find ways to make themselves available. Previously on the board, Anna had a lot of great ideas about, and actually Stephanie did too. Stephanie, what's the word? World Cafe, if you can hear me.
Coffee cafe.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Your suggestion about a coffee cafe one time.
Just opportunities where the board can be, and then also that second meeting of the month, right? That second meeting isn't the business meeting. And so just to be clear, I'm not saying people can't come and share testimony ever that's not on the agenda. I'm saying we basically divide those meetings, at least we've tried to, where we have a functional business meeting, and then we have that other meeting that sometimes is a workshop, sometimes is something else. Absolutely, totally open to hear it. Totally open. I want to know those things. I do think, though, that we can probably do a better job of creating opportunities or spaces for people to come and share things with us. Certainly not more than 3 of us, unless it's a meeting. But so those are my thoughts. And again, open to everybody else's thoughts, and will absolutely defer to board leadership, because if I didn't, I wouldn't have voted for you.
Anyone else having comments?
Can I just ask a question with that? Would students still have, how would we incorporate when something that we haven't already planned to put on the agenda, how do we hear their voice? Do students get to speak into agenda items?
Functionally, there is a way for them to do that, yes. There are 2 avenues. Not being the board in board leadership, I wouldn't be this one deciding that, but first, it can always be surfaced up through Lori, which goes to Ken's office, and he and Candy are functional in prompting things for the agenda. And then anyone is able to reach out to anybody of the board, but to board leadership, and say, I'm interested in this. How can this be something that you guys look at?
Okay, yeah, that would be my concern, that there just has to be a way for both students and parents to bring items to our attention without the risk of gatekeepers, kind of excluding that topic or information.
Yeah.
So if there is a real way that they can fairly and have access to the agenda and contribute to it without veto prior, I think what them coming to the public meeting does is give that, someone can come and share that. And so if we can find a way that still permits that and allows for that, I think that's...
I don't want to totally exclude attendee input. what I want to do is limit repetitive attendee input. Is that that we've dealt with it, we've offered solutions or meetings to the community member, and they choose not to take advantage of it, but they still continue to come and provide the same testimony. And it doesn't hurt when we have a short meeting, but there are times when we're here till 10 o'clock at night. So if we're having a long meeting, it makes it difficult.
And honestly, for me, that's not, I definitely can appreciate that perspective. So for me, first, I would not want to go to the business meeting is agenda-based only unless there were other outlets. I guess maybe I want to make sure I'm saying that. There has to be that second meeting of the month that has audience input that is not impeded in any way. And I still think there should be other avenues in addition to that. So the other, one last thing, Stephanie, and then I'll jump. The other thing is, Frida, to what you're saying, in the end, the board chair permits what they want. So someone can be speaking and you can, or the board chair, I won't call you out, but the board chair can simply end that audience input. So
I'd rather end it before than after, before they start. Stephanie, go ahead.
Well, I would just say that most people don't know the rules of how to get in front of the board or how to communicate to the board and don't know how to get on the agenda. And so for me, I really feel like we need to be as open and available as possible. And that it's really helpful for me to know when I'm out meeting with the community and someone comes to me with a problem, and this happens all the time, right? Sometimes the problem that someone has, I say, well, actually that should be dealt with at the school level, so it's best to meet with the teacher or the principal. You know, if something is more at a district level, but it's administrative, I say, why don't you go ahead and, you know, talk to Ken, right? Send an email to Ken. If it's something that everyone should hear, I'll say, you know, you can send an email to Ken and the board, but then there are also, it's great to be able to say once a month, the board actually hears people. You can come to the board and get your 2-3 minutes. And some people prefer to do that. So I'm not for limiting the ways in which people can engage with the district in any way. And I'm fine wasting 3 minutes of my time once a month to hear the same thing. I just don't believe in limiting free speech. That's just me.
Okay, so what you're saying, you want them to continue with input, which I'm all for continuing with input, but not limiting anyone that is repetitive?
I don't believe in limiting anyone. That's right.
Okay.
Unless, you know, when they're saying it's hateful or an attack or the things that we've already listed out as inappropriate in our guidelines. And I also think that we need to hold ourselves to our own behavior and not respond to comments either. As people are testifying before us, we ought to stick to our rules. That's just my preference. I don't mind when that, when once a month that occurs. It's fine if it's at the second meeting. I don't have a problem with keeping one meeting just for business, but I just don't believe in limiting speech.
Okay.
I think she's saying that. I think she's saying it's fine if it was. I believe.
I don't know if I heard that.
So Stephanie, I believe what you just said is you would be fine if there was just a business meeting as long as there was the other meeting with open input. You prefer them to be both, but you would be fine if the business meeting existed as long as the other one was there.
If there was just an opportunity once a month that I could say, our next time for public input is X. And I don't think that we should limit someone from saying something more than one time. So that's my only input.
So that would mean in the instances, and that's, I would assume, rare, like November and December, where there was only one meeting, then it would have to be allowable during the business time.
I have a different position. I think I have a different position. I don't like the idea of limiting once a month. I think it should be at every opportunity that we are in a public meeting. I think that the public input as a mechanism for community engagement for us. So I would be very concerned about that. I think there's a reason why we opened it to multiple meetings. If someone can't make that 1 month option, that to me is kind of an accessibility issue. So I would love to continue that. I would be open and open to the conversation of limiting the number of times that a constituent or an individual or student testifies on a particular topic. That's not to say that that individual can't make multiple comments on separate topics, but I do think that the limit actually, in my mind, is another mechanism to increase the opportunity for us to hear from multiple and more people than the same person. And so for me, I think that that's important as we are looking at alternative ways to increase input, increase engagement, to make it more accessible. If we're saying that, we want to hear from as many people as possible, and that to do that, we're going to limit the number of times over, let's say, as an example, over 6 months on one specific topic. And again, for me, it wouldn't be to say that if we are allowing folks to also testify on agenda items, that they couldn't testify on that specific topic, that they couldn't come back again and bring up a different topic. But I would want to make sure as a board member that I'm hearing about any and all issues and preserving that space for as many people.
So I have a comment. While it is impactful for people to come and speak here at the meeting, we also take written testimony. Do board members feel like written testimony sent to us via email or in a board packet is less valuable or received in a different way than a person sitting in front of us telling us their comments? I mean, do you read them? I guess I guess don't answer that. But do you feel like written testimony's less valuable, more valuable? I mean, they can write 5 pages to us if they want. They don't get just 3 minutes, but they're not here in person, and whoever's watching on streaming or in the audience doesn't hear those comments. But they are comments to the board, not comments to the community. So.
But it does hold us accountable to the community when it's in a public forum to be addressed. So I think it is different. It's easier to ignore something on paper. It's harder to ignore a breathing human being sitting in front of us. Okay. And I think, I understand exactly, what you were saying, Frida, definitely, but maybe at some point it prompts other people in the audience to go and talk to, if there's someone coming repetitively, and to kind of engage them in a way that may be effective, more effective than us even.
Yes, now Mandy on the Sun Schools. Now, that was something I hadn't heard before, so I was glad to hear. It's not that we carry the purse strings, that we can do anything, financially for them, but it doesn't mean that if I'm speaking with the commissioner, that they couldn't be setting up, because it sounds like the nonprofits who run those programs pay at different scales and rates, yet they all get the same kind of money for the program. So you have to question, why is that?
Yeah, why is the county choosing that one?
And it's a question that should be brought to the commissioners and whoever's handling it at City Council with the Children's Fund, that they write something into their contracts with these nonprofits and stuff, so that they could be paid. So, because that was the first time I heard it. I know the nonprofits are paid less than our teachers and staff, so they just tend to pay less. But it was good to know it's become a real issue for them. So, well,
Madam Chair, could I add something to the discussion? So I like definitely what Donna was saying, and Kyle good remarks too. I thought the idea when we decided to do the second meeting, and center it around a workshop, kind of an extended item that needed more discussion than what we have at a business meeting. I guess I'd like to keep with what I perceived the reason we went with the second meeting a month, and that is to do a workshop, and it doesn't necessarily mean there'd be public testimony there. So I kind of disagree with what Kyle says in the fact that the business meeting, it is a business meeting, it's our business meeting, and I think that it is a good opportunity for the public to come and present. I think what we need to do is maybe get back to make sure the 3 minutes are adhered to. We can't police people's, it would be really hard to try and figure out what Jane Doe is going to bring to the board. And,
Actually, they tell us.
Okay. Well, and see, that's my point. So I apologize for interrupting, but they just, when they sign up, they write what their topic is. And my point was the board chair decides. Just because somebody wrote their name down doesn't mean that the board chair has to call them.
Right. Well, we've said that before, but I think in probably most cases we always call on everybody that's signed up. We try to.
We try to make that happen.
Anyway, I guess I'd just be one to say that I like the way we do it now with the time in this meeting, but maybe, if it ever does get out of hand, that the board chair really needs to take control, and maybe that would mean if somebody was out of hand that next time, even though they'd signed up and they had a different topic, that you didn't select them. There has to be a penalty for coming to a meeting and wasting not only our time but everybody else's time that's here with frivolous stuff. So.
Okay, well, this was a discussion item.
Yeah.
And in regard to agendas, it's been asked at times, we always leave a spot at the end about other business, but anyone who has something they want brought up and they don't think about it at this meeting, as long as they let us know, would we figure 2 weeks before? That way it gets us before the agenda meeting.
Before your agenda meeting.
Before our agenda meeting, we can always see whether we can fit it in on the agenda. So it's just a timeline thing, so we can make sure we can fit something in if you want it on the agenda. Okay.
One thought I had in response to that is maybe a compromise is if someone is coming to speak again about something that has been addressed, that it is a shorter amount of time that is given to a repeat topic. So that maybe for 3 times you have the full 3 minutes, and any time after that it's 2 minutes, or it's like, because you are just coming to remind us that this is still a concern, and it would allow for that, but taking up less time. I know that's just a thought.
Okay, let's now get on to the second readings. And we'll just discuss it at the agenda meeting. Okay, we have second reading on board policy CMGBK/KGC, IBDJA, JEA, JFCG, KGC/GBK. Then we're deleting, that was a deletion. We're deleting JHCD, JHCDA, and then we're adding JHCD/JHCDA, new writing there, and KGC/GBK. Okay, does anyone have any concerns with those policies? I wanted to ask if there was any concerns. We had the first reading. I don't think we need a motion, do we, on board policy? Yeah, action. Okay. Okay. You want to move?
As soon as you call for it.
Okay, I'll call for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
A motion to approve. So moved.
Okay.
Okay, so just on CM, they're all, all good. But for CM, and I don't expect that everybody has it.
Yeah, I told him I forgot it.
Yeah, no problem. What it is, what CM is it's basically it's Division 22, right? So if it's state law, why do we need a policy that will have it presented to us?
Because we have policies a lot of state laws.
Okay. Okay.
It is just a highly recommended policy. It's not a required.
That's that exactly. But I mean, I'm not opposed to it, right? I mean, I read it 3 times. So
Then quick.
It's short.
Oh, it was, yeah. So that was my only question.
Okay. Okay. Nothing else? All those in favor for approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed? I keep forgetting about you, Stephanie. Okay, that passes. Other business. Pat had something here. I got to find it.
There's one item of other business that was brought in tonight, and I think a different version was emailed to you. We had to do
Here
a
it is.
correction on the title. So we initially had a small contract with Measure 98 funds for GED Yes to College. We are amending that contract to increase by about another $26,000 through Measure 98 for that program. And then we are also adding in a GED program through our general fund through that. We'll be using some of our outside placement funds, as well as converting some funds from salary from a position that we used to have that did testing for GED.
Oh, so we aren't doing that ourselves anymore? Because I know you stood for Ridge, wasn't it? Okay, do I have a motion to approve?
Move approval of amendment to Portland Community College Contract 1819043.
Do you have a second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it passes. Any other business?
Are the materials at our place restrictions on political campaigning by public employees an information item just for us to have and read at our leisure?
My God.
Yeah, there were 2 handouts that actually Ann Sherman provided us in advance in case you so want to delve into the particulars.
And that's related to the bond conversation.
Yeah, if you're doing a bond campaign, employees have to be real careful. We can do what we want because we're basically volunteers, but they're limited. Okay, board member reports. Christine?
I have other future agenda items, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go for it.
Go ahead.
So just so that I don't bother you with an email later.
Okay.
First, a discussion on the bond, and if you could remind me who's assigned to that committee?
Lori would have to say.
Okay. Well, you can remind me later, but just an understanding because I want to chat with those people, right? One-on-one, specifically about the title.
Bond committee.
Of the bond.
Me, Bryce, and
heading.
Stephanie as alternate.
Okay. And then I would like to have a discussion at some point, and it can be offline individually, but I really do think there is an opportunity for us to take turns to have something where we designate a specific day of the month or bi-week, it's not really fortnightly, where we are available. We had the opportunity when people came to find out about what it would be like what's involved in joining the board, right? And we were there, available for people to come and ask questions, to have those opportunities. I really think that's something that this board should consider, just as an available thing. There are people that would come and talk to us that have no interest in public speaking, right? That's not their deal.
Mm-hmm.
And if we could have something like we're not going to have 4 of us there, but if we could, you know what? It's just every 3rd Wednesday or whatever. 2 of us are here at the boardroom, something like that. I think it'd be worthwhile. So just something to consider.
Okay, well, Ken and them have their, what are you calling them, listening sessions scheduled. So Donna and I were at the last one, and they're kind of interesting to listen to what people have to say on the topics.
Okay.
So those are good ones to attend as well, where you can talk with people then at that time too.
I totally would have been there, but I was busy at math night across the track.
Oh.
So
So
yeah,
math
it's your fault too. What are you doing? The double schedule? Sheesh.
Okay. Any other business? Okay, Christine.
I just would like to wish everybody a happy and healthy new year. And that's all I have because nothing's going on yet. So the year's just getting started.
And I'll wish Christine a happy and healthy and prosperous new year, as well as everybody else. Thank you.
Just wanted to remind folks that the next Heritage Month proclamation will be Black History Month. We've already started drafting that, and I hear there have been some edits from the Equity Committee. I will begin the outreach process here early next week with community and other student voices. It's been a really exciting process, so again, we'll likely have a few community or ideally student testimony before the proclamation. The next board meeting will be, I believe, February 14th on Valentine's Day. No, we missed it.
She was the one who brought it up.
I tried.
She tried.
I did try.
Oh, it's Valentine's Day. It's so busy at the restaurants. Take them the night before.
I'm looking for I'm looking for you to break the record on speed that day. So.
Okay.
Okay.
Deal. No, I have nothing to report at this time.
And I will report that Andrea will be taken care of next month because I will not be at the meeting. So she can break the speed at it. It won't be my fault. I wanted to let people know the foundation is going to have a fundraising event, but it's a non-event event. And we're working up the theme, and you'll be getting information. We're hoping to do our first electronic newsletter this month. We're kind of getting all set for being more technology savvy. And if you haven't been visiting our website, every month we're highlighting something. So we have kind of stories we're putting out each month on the new website. And our scholarships will be come home in the first time, I think it's the 1st of March. And we'll be opening up our spring grants around that time. And that will all be done online this year. So they'll have to go to the website to apply and submit and everything. We're trying to streamline things as much as possible. In regard to housing, I'm still moving ahead with took kind of the holidays off, but I'm moving ahead, hoping to meet with 4 of the affordable housing developers. They want to meet as a group so we can hash out what a preference policy might look like that would work for them, because I want it to work for them if I do push it toward the Housing Bureau and then City Council. So I'm hoping not next week, the week after is when a lot of them are available. So that's where I'm planning to meet and start moving ahead. It takes forever for them to build affordable housing, so I figured it's not something I had to rush to get done. So, but I was trying to think what else I went to. I went to the Christmas thing at the district office, and I read to kids at, their Lights of Winter. I got corralled into it. I wasn't supposed to do it, but I ended up doing it anyway. So at Gilbert Heights, so that's always fun to be with the kids there. And so that's it. And I will adjourn the meeting.